Hey Sarah Michelle, what's a GMO?
I don't know. I don't know either.
A GMO, or genetically modified organism, is a result of a laboratory process where genes from the DNA of one species are extracted and artificially forced into the genes of an unrelated plant or animal. Here are some examples of products that contain genetically engineered ingredients. As a nutrition major here at the University of Nevada, health is a very important factor in my life.
Did you know 80% of packaged foods from our local grocery store contain genetically modified ingredients? Of course you didn't, because these products aren't labeled. Today, 93% of soy, 90% of canola, and 89% of corn grown here in the United States have been genetically engineered.
So why doesn't the U.S. require GMO labeling? Well, here to discuss is Alexis Badenmeyer and Elizabeth Kucinich. Alexis is the political director of Organic Consumer Association, and Elizabeth is the director of policy for Center for Food Safety.
Let's start out by asking you all this because Vermont has already passed one of these referendums, essentially. Voters there decided they wanted this, and of course, in that case, it doesn't take effect, I think, until 2016. Manufacturers say, we don't need this. Food companies say, we don't need this. And they say it's prohibitively expensive because if we do it in Oregon, if we do it in Colorado, we've got to do it everywhere, or we have this piecemeal. If you get it passed in Oregon and Colorado, and of course already in Vermont, does that just mean there's GMO labeling in every state? Is that essentially what happens, Alexis?
I sure hope so. The companies should have done this a long time ago. Consumers have a right to know what they're eating.
That's a pretty simple answer. I mean,
Yeah,
what do you
they
think?
certainly do.
Do you think that you would no longer need to have legislation in Texas, New Mexico, Florida? You wouldn't really need it all over the country because you're not going to print one set of labels in Oregon and Vermont and another set for everyone else, right?
Well, this state-by-state initiatives have been tremendous in really building this conversation and showing that this is a really solid political movement. You know, the food movement's not just a movement now, it is a political machine that's rolling through the nation. And we're seeing really how this debate is coming to Washington, D.C. fast. And I think that whether the initiatives pass or fail in Oregon and in Colorado, we are going to see a battle really ensuing in Washington, D.C. very, very soon.
Now, what I find interesting is that these biotech companies, you have DuPont, you have Monsanto, Dow, that's another one, they're pouring millions upon millions of dollars into campaigns to, basically not put GMO labeling on any of their products, and obviously they wouldn't want that. But how effective has big agriculture been in terms of campaigning to not have GMO labeling, considering that there's a statistic 90% of Americans are in favor of GMO labeling? I mean, that's an uphill battle for these biotech companies, no?
Well, what they're doing is they're just throwing money and misinformation at the campaign. So when you look at the beginning of the campaigns, you see all of the people really want to have GMO labelings, and by the end of the campaign, they've been completely spun around by misinformation, advertising, false claims, false allegations that costs are going to go up and farmers are going to lose their livelihoods, and all of this stuff. That they're completely disoriented. So we really need to have people who are standing up for people's right to know. We need to know what's in our food. We need to know whether we're eating pesticide-laden GMOs, or the other opportunity, if people aren't able to find GMO labeling, is to buy organic, because then we really know that it's non-GMO and that there's no chemicals in it.
There you go, solve that.
Most of the concerns surrounding genetically modified organisms relates to the potential negative effects on the environment and human health. Toxicity is a huge issue surrounding chemical pesticides and herbicides. Bees and butterflies are the most talked about examples. They have now become endangered because of the new agricultural techniques being used to create these genetically modified organisms. In 1992, the FDA claimed that genetically modified foods were safe to eat. FDA scientists, on the other hand, warn that genetically modified organisms can create unpredictable, hard-to-detect side effects, including allergies, toxins, new diseases, and nutritional problems. Even though there is a lack of human-related evidence, genetically modified organisms have altered the lives of many animals. These pigs were fed a diet of genetically engineered corn and showed signs of stomach inflammation and abnormal growths.
Pay close attention to what you're about to see. These rats have been fed with transgenic corn during their entire life cycle. The tumors they suffer from are enormous. The study that revealed the effect of the GMOs on the health of these rats has just been completed. It lasted for 2 years.
Both these fish are 18 months old, but the larger genetically engineered Aqua Advantage salmon grows twice as fast as the regular salmon.
There has not been sufficient animal health testing, human health testing, or environmental impact testing of these new transgenic fish.
Basically, they've taken agriculture and built an industrial model which doesn't fit nature. So instead of changing their agricultural model to accommodate what is natural, they're changing nature to accommodate the industrial model.
We simply do not have enough data or experience to know what the long-term impacts of these modified foods are. It's because of the added bacterial genes, proteins, and gene fragments never before seen in foods that the United States should require labeling.
Now, developed nations around the world all agree that genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, are not safe for consumption. However, in the U.S., that's not the case. In more than 60 developed countries, there are outright bans on the sale of GMOs, countries like Australia, Japan, and all of the nations in the EU.
What do these 64 countries have in common? Well, they all require labeling of genetically modified foods. The United Kingdom is one of those countries. They decided to label genetically modified foods for the overriding priority of the human health and the environment. If these modified ingredients were proven harmless, then why did these 64 countries feel the urge to waste their money and time labeling for their consumers?
Some products, like Earth Balance, have made it easier on us and labeled their products themselves. By shopping in the natural foods aisle, you're eliminating yourself from genetically modified organisms. Many people oppose buying organic foods, when in fact, a box of Cheerios like these are the same price.
That there are benefits to genetically modified food, and that you have this thing, what is it called? Golden rice, and it basically does this, it's a beta-carotene enriched rice, and that's one argument that it's helpful for people in malnourished countries, and this could be great. And another one is, these academic researchers who are interested in essentially harnessing this genetic technique to boost agriculture in places where there's droughts and things of that nature. What do you say to this argument, and are there some valid points in there?
These are pipe dreams in the industry. They have not been realized. The only thing that GMOs do right now is enable chemical companies to sell more chemicals, to create food that doesn't have pesticides sprayed on it. The food actually has pesticides growing inside of it. And the food can be sprayed with herbicides that used to kill the plants. Now you can spray these herbicides directly on the plants and the plants don't die. That's what genetic engineering has been used for thus far.
And just quickly, we have about 30 seconds for each of you to finish up here. But again, to your point, as far as longer life for the food and all that, it just hasn't taken place. You don't want to ban GMOs altogether, right? You just want them to be labeled at this point? Just let people know what they're eating?
I think people really need to know what they're eating, and I think that our system of agriculture really needs to be addressed very seriously, so that we have regenerative agriculture that actually sustains health within our soil, that creates healthy people, healthy food. And right now what we have is chemical companies that own 53% of the world's seed supply, and they're continuing to patent and sell chemicals.
What if we could produce more yield on the same amount of land, squeeze more water from a single raindrop, conserve natural resources while caring for the environment?
Monsanto is the company that told us that PCBs were safe. They told us that Agent Orange was safe. They told us that DDT was safe, and now they're in charge of telling us if their own genetically modified foods are safe.
The reason why we have 170 million acres of genetically engineered corn and soybeans and cotton and canola oil and sugar beets in the United States is because it doesn't have to be labeled.
Even if you decide not to change your eating habits, we should still have the right to know.
Let's become the 65th country to require labeling.